everyone. Welcome back to the Camden Interactive Series. In our last episode, we had Akshat Saraf, a next gen member of Radha Smelters, share his take on culture imbibing, inculcating, and leading by example. In today's episode, we have a family business principal, Mr. Arun Lakhani, Chairman and MD of Vishwaraj Infrastructure Limited. Based out of Nagpur, he's been featured in many forums and awarded for his work in the waste, water management, and Indian water utility sector. Welcome, sir, to the Camden Interactive Series, and we're really glad to have you on our episode today.
Thanks, sir.
What we'll start with is, first of all, would love to hear a little bit more about, your background and especially the work in wastewater management, which is so sort of important for our environment. And then move on to, how does culture impact various aspects of a family business?
Thanks, Aryan. About the business that we are in, basically the water business. So, there are two parts to it. First is the distribution and the drinking water supplies, which is very visible part and which is very close to everybody's heart because it affects us directly. So we do that. We have we are handling the almost 3 crore people. We are supplying water across India, and the other part. So the first part is that reducing the losses in the distribution networks and saving the precious resource that is water. And second, more important part is the reuse, or I will say first, as a first step for India, it's the treatment of sewage. In India, we produce some 60,000 million liters of sewage every day, out of which we are processing hardly 22,000. The rest of it goes to contaminate our freshwater resources all across the country. You see our wells, our lakes, rivers. Ganga is a prime example of that. And now we have this mission that is going to clean up. So, although not urgent, but it's extremely important aspect of the environment and our health, because today 21% diseases are waterborne. So, what we are doing as a first step, what we did is a 100% privately funded PPP project, where we process 200 million liters per day of sewage and supply 190 million liters per day to the thermal power station. The beauty of this is that the fresh water that they were using earlier, 190 million liters per day, is now available for the city of Nagpur for drinking purposes. Now this takes care of next 35 years population growth. It's like generations, water security for coming generations. So I mean, we have as a culture always had the angle of aligning ourselves with the larger public good. So that is how it evolved here, I think. And we are adding many more similar projects across India. We have in total sewage and water, we are now servicing 4 crore people. And we are also now, we have started our first venture internationally as well in this particular field.
That's incredible. That's really, when the whole world is talking about ESG and ESG compliant companies, and it's really very heartening to hear, our companies based out of, India that are involved in this kind of work. So thank you for sharing that. I think we can move on to the question around culture, given that that's the topic of our series today, and how, it impacts various aspects of running a family business. So, I would love to hear your thoughts, sir, since you've sort of set this up, and this is also a unique space in terms of how you set out culture in what the company does.
I think it's a continuing thread, which runs across generations. It is some sort of a way of working, thought process, which keeps on evolving. It is not something which is rigid. Because the essence of business is change. We see in this turbulent business space where things keep on moving. So the the culture should always provide that comfort to the team, to the family members, that there are no surprises. The culture defines and enables people to take decisions because they are aligning to the larger thought process. So, in my opinion, this is very important, and it evolves. At certain stage, then you maybe write it down. But in any business, there has to be a way of working, and that I think is culture.
And across a multi-generation business, that is also somewhat could be a little fluid, right? So, um, how much of the culture that you initially set up is still prevailing now through various levels of management and leadership? Uh, and how do you kind of accommodate for those changing times and multi-generational aspect?
I was born in a business family, so the basic ingrained, the basic that those core values have been ingrained in me from the childhood. And when I started independently, so at that time, my thought process and my likings probably shaped the framework for the culture that was to follow as we grew from step by step. Like I said, my first venture in the late 80s was LPG when it was first time privatized, and we launched a company called Mahagas. Again, if you see the same theme, that it was affecting lakhs of people, improving their life from those firewood and kerosene to a much efficient and cleaner and healthier fuel. And also there was a huge demand, so it should make commercial sense for anybody to take up a business. As for and then we are continuing in water space, like what we spoke, and then reuse space. So the new generation is probably adding to it right now, and I feel that better ways of working, better efficiencies, better exposure to the world. Like, for example, like what you were saying, like in ESG. So this environment and social impact we were already doing in our water business in Nagpur. I will also add a thought behind this basically aligning with the larger good. It's like that the definition of Tao, that if you align yourself with the way nature flows, then you find the path of least resistance. And I think every business welcomes the path of least resistance to reach the success. So in our case, probably these values or these thought process or culture, whatever you call it, is getting echoed in the next generation as well. But I expect them to bring more, like we were talking of ESG. Now the importance that is being given, and some aspects of that which we were also missing. We were doing environment, social impact, but now it's always welcome to improve it, to evolve it.
No, thank you, and that's so well said. I think I'm going to definitely note that down. That when you go in along with nature's flow, you're in the path of least resistance. And I think so many of us try and change the inevitable, right? Just basically do everything we can to prevent something from happening that cannot be prevented, and we have to realize things that are in our control and things that are not in our control. I think that's absolutely right. You talked about next gen, you talked about doing things differently. I think that leads to our next question is, the next gen, the popular thing that all the kids say is that we are a catalyst for change. What does this mean to you? Being the principal and being earlier in the generation, and what other things do you expect that you would like the younger generation to bring about in your business, in maybe the environment as a whole?
I think the next generation will definitely bring in change, will definitely improve it much better. That is the expectations. Will have much better exposure of the whole world and the type the businesses are run across the world, not just our country. So lot of expectations there for them to, change the way we think or we do the business. I think, but the core values, the basic, fundamental core values, they still give the stability to any person, any business, any family. Because if that is disturbed, then it is difficult for someone to survive the turbulence of the business, outer business world. I think the new generation with their exposure will definitely evolve, improve, and add to the culture. It will evolve definitely the way business works, much more efficient, much more effective, much more clearer, in nature. So, and unless we, you see, every generation when they start or working, they have given a shape of how they want to work and how their own persona is reflected somewhere in the way it is shaped. So is the next generation will do. So I don't see a conflict there. Many times, the question comes that, is there a conflict between two generations? I mean, there is a very clearly defined way that this is the way it has been and this is the way it should be, because the business should remain prime. Business should have the energy. The business should keep on expanding and growing. So the people who runs it at that particular point of time, it's like Bhagirath, there are 100 generations who have contributed to bring Ganga home. So we must recognize it is their time and they will shape how it will go further.
My next question then therefore would be, playing off what you just said, is that can multiple cultures coexist in a family business where you let the younger generation do things in a certain way and expand their horizons, but then you still sort of have your own core maintained? And what's your thought? Does that disrupt the fabric of the family business, or can that coexist?
I think in a family, one culture will be more, I will say, efficient, suitable, and comfortable. The methodologies will change. The basic values will get evolved. So, like something that is, the world has discovered that, okay, now we should not have emission, and then everybody will try to see that if the taxi is an electric taxi, they will opt for that. So these changes with the time has to come, which probably were not there in the earlier thought or the way it was being done. But if it is an entirely different way of working, then it is difficult to in my opinion, for these two cultures to coexist. There can be facets to the basic core values. From generations, it can change, but it can add to the core values. But I also don't see if the culture is giving the comforts, the success, the basic efficiency in the way of working, that there is a conflict that will come as a multicultural situation. I think if communication is strong enough, so these can be addressed.
I agree, and I think you're absolutely right. First of all, your answer that there is one dominant culture, which I agree, because I think it's very confusing for the organization to try and manage two different cultures. I also think that sometimes, it's not necessary to change things for the sake of changing them. And when new energy comes into a business, the expectation is that, next gen will be a catalyst and we're gonna they're gonna do things differently, but it does not mean that they have to. And like you said, I think when something's moving smoothly and when a certain culture is working and there's good communication, it is not necessary to bring change. It's always good to be open to it. I actually have only one more question, sir, and we can then talk more freely. how would you advise your peers who want to pass on the cultural legacy smoothly and harmoniously? I'm not suggesting that you're ready to do that, but if there are others that are, then would love to hear your thoughts.
I think the key is communication. Is the key is the openness in communication and understanding, and understanding different point of views and accepting them as that they can coexist, and then finding a common way, common path. I will say, like culture is like water. If you put it in different containers, it will give you different shapes. But H2O remains H2O. It doesn't change. So with the generations from rectangular to triangle or a pentagon is fine. I mean, that doesn't really change the core values, the core substance. But if so, to distinguish between whether we have a disagreement on the shape or the very character of water. I mean, if there is you want a fragrant water, you can improve it. But I think this probably is more of a reason of conflict or disagreement of about the shape. Shape has to be that generation's way of working. We cannot have the same way things will work. But communication and understanding that these changes are expected and should happen. That I think is I can think of that will let that the core value survive. And to top of that, ultimately these are their values. Once next generation comes in,
correct,
it's for them to decide.
And I think that's a very important distinction, as I mentioned a few moments ago. One is, when you're actually handing over something, and at that point you take a view that, look, this is the culture and legacy that I've created, and the next gen will do their own without me interfering in it. But as I said, you may not be ready to hand over the business, but at the same time, you want to coexist with the next gen. So how do you then sort of do that with a framework or a platform that has those same cultural values and it is bringing in new ones? I think that's much harder. I think coexisting is much harder, which as you're doing, versus just saying, okay, this is what I've created here. Now, you grow it in your own way.
But I will say that it's also very wonderful, like in my case particularly, I have a international badminton player giving his sarang, like the younger son, so giving his own views and solid engineering finance background, Siddharth and Dhatripriya. So it's amazing the type of exposure these guys have and the angle they put up into that. I believe, once there is a fundamental alignment between people, then after communication, you ultimately come to a conclusion, which is a common conclusion. There will be different ways, of course. There will be different views. And I think that is what it's all about, humanity, isn't it? Coexistence.
Yeah, correct. Absolutely. No, and congratulations, sir, for having a star in the family like that. I think I think that's another sort of representation of your vision, that you're able to promote that kind of skill set. Otherwise, a lot of the traditional businesses going back were more about education, business, and not really recognizing the unique skills of their children in some regard. So that's really great to hear. I'm done with my questions. So is there something else you'd like to talk about or enlighten us with? We'd really love to hear that.
I think generally, what now is, like you said, the ESG, the social side. Personal, this is my personal, inclination that, and I believe strongly that if you go for the larger good and if you align you with yourself to the larger goals, it makes business sense. I'm not saying this to do for charity or being a good person. And the more and more people align to this and bring in maybe a longer way, but not a shortcut. I think as a whole, as a society, as a community, as a nation, we will definitely see much better results and much better uh, improvement into the overall environment, everybody's life.
Terrific. I think that's a fantastic summary of our talk today. Um, Thank you so much, Mr. Lakhani, for sharing your thoughts so candidly. Um, you know, I continue to, I look forward to interacting with you and continuing to getting to know you. The Camden community is always grateful for your time and your contribution. Thank you very much. And stay tuned with us for more such candid conversation at the Camden Interactive series. Until next time, thank you all and take care and stay well. Stay safe.
Thanks, Aryan. It is always a pleasure to be and interact with the Camden team, and it is also a lot of new learning and interacting with people from different walks of life. I mean, congratulations for creating this wonderful platform for all of us to come and get enriched. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for being a part of it.